Hello and welcome to From Upside Down to Right Side Up, Tips for the Transition. I'm Maria Tomas Keegan, your host. This is my continuing series of inspiring conversations with women who are brilliant and resilient, and they have inspiring stories to tell, and they are brave enough to come here and tell them to us. It is my pleasure to welcome Karen Chaston to the show today, all the way from Australia. I find Karen's story so compelling because many of us lose someone significant in our lives, and we grieve and we struggle with getting on with life in a meaningful way. Karen discovered how to unwrap a gift from her loss. We call this episode, How Death Saved My Life. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Maria, and thank you for having me here today.
Welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I'm glad we found a time that between Australia and Phoenix, we were able to find a good time for this to happen. So let's just jump right in. Would you please tell us your story?
Yes. So back in 2011, July 2011, I was a CFO of a publicly listed company. And, most people would have said, she's successful, she's got the career, the salary, the house, the car, the family, the, overseas trips, all of that sort of thing that a lot of us define success by. So on the 10th of July, 2011, it was a Sunday morning, and my husband and I woke up thinking that we were going to just have a lazy day at home, which was good because I normally worked so much. And within about 15 minutes, my husband decided to take the rubbish outside, and he walked down the stairs and he opened the back door as I was, getting breakfast ready. And he called back and he said, bloody hell, Dan is asleep at our back door. Now, alarm bells just went off because Dan, our 27-year-old son, whilst he had a habit of drinking way too much, he always made it home to bed. So I very quickly took the stairs, and as I ran out the back door, I could see him lying there on the ground in the fetal position with saliva coming out of his mouth. And I thought, oh, well, that's good. Saliva's coming out of his mouth, that's was a good sign. Well, I thought it was a good sign. So we tried to wake him and he wouldn't wake, and so we called the paramedics, and they arrived within 15 minutes and during that time I went and woke his girlfriend up. They'd gone out separately the night before, and she came running out, and we were all just people from next door. We had a unit block beside us that overlooked our backyard, and they all came running and they all tried to help. But unfortunately, the paramedics just walked in, and it just seemed like a second. They just walked in and they just literally just looked at him and came back, and they just said, "I'm sorry, he's dead." And I was like, no, go back, and they said, his kidneys had all pooled, and they said, look, he's been dead for hours, which was such a huge shock. Like, you never expect your child to pass before you. And it just was horrific. But what's really interesting is the way that my husband and I just took the whole information so completely differently. Like, obviously the police arrived and they had to do all their checks and everything like that. And just the fact that I had to ring, like, Dan has a twin brother and he also has an older brother. And the first thing I wanted to do was to ring them because they lived in a different state, so they would have had to have catch a plane to come down. Whereas my husband was like, can't we just sit and do nothing? And I'm like, no, I've got to get the boys here. Whereas it's really interesting the fact that, and the whole grieving process for my husband and I have been completely different. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just interesting to see how we're all the same, but we're also different at the same time. So what happened, we obviously didn't know what he died from. We knew that he'd gone out with a couple of friends, and we rang one of the friends, and we knew that he would have had way too much to drink. But very quickly, because he caught a cab from his friend's place to home, and the police got in contact with the cab driver, and the cab driver said, sure, he had a lot to drink, but he wasn't abusive, he was still talkative, and he was joking with me. So they knew that he wasn't like completely out of it. And at the autopsy the next day, they, and I have to say, the people who do those sort of jobs are absolutely amazing. It was less than 24, well, it was just over 24 hours when we went there, because, we found him at 8:45 on Sunday morning, and at 1:00 the next day we went to the morgue and they just gave us some information. This lady who gave us the information, she had notes in front of her, but she didn't read them, and she told us everything. And she told him, what they had done to him, when we looked at the body. They said, well, this we did, this he had, sort of thing. And they just went through everything so beautifully, explaining everything to him. So what they said was he had lungs that were so bad that if he had smoked full on, which he hadn't for, say, 10, 12 years, because he was 27, he couldn't have done a quarter of the damage to the lungs. He had a brain tumour, which was benign, which we knew nothing about any of this. And we got an autopsy report like 9, 10 months later, and it didn't really tell us. But I'm just going with what I'm guided to tell you, so I hope this is okay. So I haven't really said this a lot of times. So about a year or 2 years later, I have a friend. She actually lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was writing my book then, which is called Beyond a Mother's Worst Nightmare, which was the story of, at that stage, my 4-year journey after Dan passing. And I asked this friend of mine to read it before I sort of completed it. And she was reading it, and then she sent me a message and she said, I've been told to stop reading it. And I said, what do you mean you've been told to stop reading it? By who? And she said, by Dan. And I said, oh. And I said, so what's he saying? She says, he wants us to hook up and have a 3-way conversation. And I went, oh, I knew you read energy, but I didn't know that you did that. And she said, yeah, I do it all the time. So we had this 3-way conversation. And in this conversation, Dan said, Mum, stop telling everyone that I drank too much and that is why I passed. And I said, well, okay, well, how did you pass? And he says, it was my lungs. My lungs failed me. I fell over and I went to catch my breath and I couldn't catch my breath. And I went, oh, okay. And then I said to him, so did you know you were dying? Because like we were asleep in the house upstairs in the front of the house and he was out the back downstairs. And I said, so did you know you were dying? And he said, yes. And I said, and he says, but it sort of came to a bit of a peace. And I went, I'm so sorry that we were asleep. And he said, and this may freak some people out, but anyway, let's go with it. He said, don't worry, Mum, you and Dad astral travelled and helped me pass. And I went, I didn't know we did that. I knew we astral travelled when we slept. I said, but I didn't know that we did things like that. And he said, yeah. So how amazing is that we do that? And all these little conversations and stuff has what helped me to not only come to the awareness that he's always with me and he's always travelling and he's always guiding me. And believe me, I am a completely different person to who I was 8 years ago when he passed. But I just find it amazing that we are guided so much from the other realm and from our own intuition and our own inner guidance that we don't know it and we don't value it, because we all feel so lonely sometimes, but we've always got people traveling with us.
Karen, this is such it's such an interesting story to me. I am so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
First of all,
yeah, thank you.
What I love about your story is that you have found not just one gift, I think lots of gifts along the way through the course of your grieving process. So you initially, you told me that you initially carried on.
Oh yeah, I just
as it was before, and I know that there were lots of emotions that come up with a choice like that. So I'd love for you to take a deeper dive into that part of your journey in our next segment. Would you do that?
Yes, of course.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I would like everyone to just stay with us as we take a breather for about 30 seconds. And while you wait, learn just a bit more about Karen. Then we'll be back with the next part of my conversation with Karen Chaston on From Upside Down to Right Side Up, Tips for the Transition. Stay tuned.
Have you ever felt that some people seem to have their very own golden success nugget? Karen's latest book, Live Love by Design, illustrates how you can design your personalized success blueprint for all 4 life pillars. All about you, your relationships, your expertise, your wealth creation. For your PDF copy, visit livelovebydesign.com.
So welcome back. It was just a half a minute there. Today's inspiring conversation is with Karen Chaston, who joins us from Australia and has told us about the sudden loss of her 27-year-old son. It's a story about a mother's grief with a gift. And like I think actually there's more than one gift here. Yeah. We call this episode, How Death Saved My Life. It has always been an honor for me to share inspiring stories like Karen's. These women are figuring out how to move through life's inevitable trials and tribulations and come out on top in their own unique version of triumph. They help us to know that we are not alone when life turns our own world upside down. Karen, I so appreciate you joining us today to share your story.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. We promise to take a deeper dive into your emotional journey. After choosing to just carry on after Dan's death, what happened to you emotionally and physically and spiritually when you were just going through the motions of life and not really participating?
Well, at the time I was the CFO of a publicly listed company and I just went straight back to work. Like, even to the point, like 2 days after, so I took the week off, before Dan's funeral, but I did go in and do some stuff that I had to do. And I thought, I'm going to go in because I want everyone just to say, I'm sorry, and then they can move on and not have to say it again, which is absolutely ridiculous. But you're not thinking straight. And to be quite honest, The decisions that I made probably in the first year, some of them were not ideal. And a lot of people would say to me, are you sure about that? And I'm going, yes, that's it, sort of thing. Thinking that I was the person that I was before Dan passed. And one thing I've learned in this journey is you're never going to be the same. Love never dies, but it transforms. And Dan and my relationship has transformed. And to be quite honest, in some respects, he's the parent now. He's guiding me more than, when he was a child, I was obviously guiding him. But looking back, the fact that I went straight back to work and I used alcohol as, actually, to be quite honest, I used the whole three things: working too much, eating too much, and drinking too much as my coping mechanisms. My husband used to say that he didn't like coming home in the afternoons. He would get home around 4 p.m. and Dan used to get home around 4 p.m. and they'd go off and they'd do something together, or they'd just sit and chat, whereas I wouldn't get home till like 7 p.m. So they would have that, and his girlfriend wouldn't get home till later either. So they had that time together, and my husband said, I don't like coming home in the afternoons. I can smell him and I miss him, which is totally understandable. But I probably used work as my coping mechanism. So I numbed myself, I guess, is the first, feeling. And I put up this barrier, and I'm not sure, most people may be aware that a lot of people carry weight as a barrier. It's just to have this little bit of, space between people. And I know that I did that, with the eating more and all of this sort of stuff. So I had more of a sort of a cushion around me, so people just left me alone. So that was the first one. And I guess I was in a fair bit of denial because I was definitely drinking more than I had been before. And I thought I was okay, but it wouldn't take much for me to fly off the handle. And since then, and in all of my learnings and stuff, I heard this saying, which I absolutely love, and it was, if you're always angry, you need more green in your life. And when I heard it, it was probably only about 3 years ago, it sort of stopped me, and I thought, I was always angry, especially after the time Dan passed. And then I realised that I didn't have enough green vegetables in my life. Like, I green juice every morning now, and some days I will drink green juice all day long. But then I took it one step further and I thought, green's the colour of the heart chakra. I needed more love in my life. Love for myself and love for others. And I think that's what it was more than anything else. The fact I went straight back to work, not only did I disrespect Dan, I also disrespected myself, because I now know that when any tragic loss comes into your life, I do believe it's a gift, but how you unwrap that gift is through the stopping. It's through the stopping and the breathing and the evaluating where you are now and where you want to be, because you're never going to be the same again. So it's about designing your new way of life, designing who you want to become, but it has to be in the stopping. And most people don't allow the wash of emotions to come through. We block them, which then causes more disease, because emotions are energy emotion. So they've got to flow through you, and it's through the flowing through you that you come to love. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, Karen, that's such an important piece of guidance from you.
Thank you.
You're so right that when major events happen, the loss could be of so many different things, right?
Well, the Grief Recovery Institute say there's 44 different loss events that can affect our lives. So when we think about that, every single one of us are going to have a lot of major loss events.
Right. Absolutely. Right. So, and we will grieve through each one of them. I think it's so important what you just said, the stopping part,
Yes.
but that's the scary part, because when we stop, we can't hide.
That's right.
We can't hide from everything we're feeling, right? So, yeah. So it's such wise advice from you, but it is the hardest thing.
Yeah, it is.
For us to do, because and it's the scariest part of it, because we don't know what's coming. We
But
don't.
not only that, Maria, we live in a world where we have so many things that stop us from feeling our emotions.
Yeah.
And that's our biggest problem. And I feel that's why we have so many issues in the world, is because we don't allow ourselves to feel them. And then when they come through in such an outrage or such a big burst of energy. Everyone's like, whoa, where did that come from? It's because we stuff them down with so many things.
Yeah.
You know, I love the analogy of when you're a compulsive eating. It's like, what are you stuffing down? What emotion are you stuffing down with that food that you're not saying? You know, it's meant to come the other way. So you're just putting food into it, not because you just eat too much. It's because you're putting your emotions away and hiding it behind the food. It's really interesting when you get into all of these things and understand human nature and the world that we live in. Like, you go to a doctor, you're feeling a bit upset, they give you a pill. Like, that's not getting to the cause of what you're feeling. It's just hiding it.
Absolutely, that's so true. The image that your words conjured for me, the stuffing our faces with food when we're trying to deal with something that we really don't know how to deal with. There's no manual. Unless we've gone through something like this before, as you have, as I have, and we've kind of figured out what are the coping mechanisms that are more positive than negative, right? That's when we can lean in on our inner wisdom and that our experience. But that image that came up for me, it's not only just stuffing ourselves with food, right? It could be with alcohol, as you did. And I, don't get me wrong, I love my glass of wine, and I'm not grieving right now.
There's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine.
Nothing wrong with that. But it's the excessive stuffing, right? It's just that whole stuffing our emotions with something that is not necessarily healthy for us, number one, and then the process of stuffing, so that our emotions can't kind of reveal themselves and flow. They're not meant to be stuck inside us.
No. And if they are stuck, they'll come out as disease in some form.
Yeah. Or, as you said, in inappropriate behavior. And that's this is such good stuff. Thank you for sharing this.
No, thank you.
All right. So I would like everyone to just hang in with us for another breather. We're going to talk with Karen next about what she learned from this process, and she's going to share those with us in her next segment. My cat Maverick has come to visit. I hope you don't mind. We'll be right back with tips for the transition. As always on this show, we save the best for last. Everyone can learn from someone else's experience, especially through grief. And this is why we call the show Tips for the Transition. Before we get on to those tips, though, I would like to tell you a little bit more about Karen Chaston. Before the loss of her son, Karen told you that she was a chief financial officer for a corporation, and she was on that corporate treadmill. She was also a CPA. And even before the tragic loss, she was feeling the pressures of juggling her busy career, her family, her personal obligations, the big house, the cars, all of that, like so many of us do. And when her world came crashing down, she realized that it was time to, after a fashion, reevaluate who she was now. That led her on a personal and spiritual growth journey to become her own best friend. As she left the corporate life behind, she founded her own company called Live, Love by Design. I love that. Live, Love by Design. Karen now helps others to wrap their own gifts for grief and loss. It's women like Karen who are role models for the rest of us when it comes to learning to thrive. Karen, I appreciate you sharing your story so much with us. There is so much conflicting information about grief and grieving. What did you find helped or hindered your process? And what other lessons did you learn since it's been 8 years since Dan passed? Share with us.
I guess the most important lesson that I learned, and it took me a long time, I was like, it's probably within a year of Dan's passing, but I was in my 50s when it came to me that we are the only person we're going to spend our entire life with. Now, think about that. How many times do we put ourselves last? What we want to do, whether it's a personal thing, an activity, an experience, or whether it's in relationship to our career, our health. Like, we've only got one body. And I know that I was putting myself last, and my health was the lowest thing on my priority, which is absolutely ridiculous, because if we don't have our health, we don't have anything. And I love the old adage, which is, I spent my health to get my wealth, and now I'm spending my wealth to get back my health. And that's something for everyone to embrace, especially from a young age, is you can never get it back. So maintain it, every day, do something to maintain your health. And I think that is the greatest gift that I feel that I received, because I am a lot healthier, I am a lot more aware. And not only that, we don't know when we're going to pass. No one has on their birth certificate an expiry date. So we really do need to live our lives not so much that today's our last day, but it may be, we may not be here in 6 months' time. So are we really doing the things that we love? Dan was 27. He was, just starting to get his career in order, just starting a relationship, or he's 2 years into the relationship. He hadn't even had any children, all those sort of things that we want for our children. And that's one of the things that I learned about grief. It's about us reconciling the dreams and the aspirations we had for that relationship. And obviously for a child, you have so many things that you want them to do. So it's about reconciling that and coming to a complete with it. And that's what I feel with a lot of grief programs as such is, they'll tell you just to go through the motions and feel it and all these sort of things. But it's about actually completing the relationship, what it was. And whether it's a death, whether it's a marriage, or whether it's your health, it's about actually coming to a scenario where you go, okay, this is what's happened, and this is what isn't going to happen, and just complete everything with it. And it's through that completion process that you actually move through grief. and you come to a complete relationship, because we have so many incompletes in our lives that I feel that is what stops us from doing so much. But more than anything, what I've learned from from Dan's death is he did save my life. I know for a fact that I was heading towards either a heart attack, a stroke, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, possibly, definitely burnout. My whole body was screaming at me, you're not healthy. I had fibroids, I'd had a hysterectomy. Everything that I now know about the signs of what your body is talking to you, but we don't listen. So every single thing that happened to me was because I was living in my masculine. I wasn't being true to who I was. I was full of adrenaline, full of cortisol. All you had to do was look at me. I was a lot heavier than I am now, and my whole body was just saying adrenaline. I can look at most women now and I can tell them whether they're over-adrenalized or where they're at just by looking at them, which is the sort of things we should be taught at school. Understand ourselves biochemically. We have every single thing inside of us for us to live an abundant, healthy life. But we don't listen to ourselves or trust ourselves. We're too busy looking outside of ourselves and wondering why we're not achieving the way we want to, whereas all we have to do is go internally.
You just raised up several great points. The first one is taking care of ourselves first rather than last. So many of us, it's a big topic I talk about all the time. It is important that we take care of ourselves first, or we will have nothing left to take care of anyone else that we care about. The other thing you said, that his death saved your life.
Yeah.
That's astonishing to hear. I don't know many mothers who have lost a son, and I know a few who would say that because they're so immersed in their own grieving.
Yeah.
And they haven't gone through the process of completion.
That's right. Yes.
That, as you described it, and I would like to add to that, completing the relationship, because it is. I mean, it's an event ended it, right? So they're completing it for ourselves in our own hearts and in our minds. It also means that we need to recognize who we are now.
Yes.
That event has happened. That something this dramatic has changed in our life. So who are we now, and who do we want to be going forward?
That's exactly it. That's it. It is so right. And I just want to make it clear, Dan and I still have a relationship. It's just a different relationship now. A completely different relationship.
Right.
And he's always guiding me. And about looking after yourself, and I know so many people go, oh, that's selfish if you put yourself first. I'd just like to say it's actually you're actually depriving everyone in your life of your best you when you put yourself last, because you don't show up in your essence, because you're depleted, you're resentful, and you just cannot show up in your beautiful essence. And we all have our essence to shine, but because it's, put in the back burner, it doesn't come forward. So you're actually doing everyone in your life, especially yourself, an injustice by not putting yourself first. So flip your perspective on the way that you think that it's selfish.
Oh, I love that. Flip your perspective. That's a really good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, because if I always talk about the teacup analogy. Do you know that one?
No, I'd love to.
It's why my book is called From Upside Down to Right Side Up. And there are teacups on the cover because when our teacup is right side up and we are filling it until it overflows and we give from the overflow, we are never depleted. We are always giving our best selves. And I love, I love flip the perspective. I think that's so important, so important.
Thank you. I like that too.
Yeah, I love sharing this kind of stuff too. Karen, thank you so much for all of your perspectives today. We all go through so much grief in our lives. We've talked about that before, whether it's the loss of a loved one or a pet, the ending of a marriage or a career, our health, as you said. I am certain that there are people in our audience today who will want to know more about you. So I would like everyone to just take a moment because Karen has a special offer for each one of you today. Watch this.
I'm Karen Chaston, a Beyond Loss life coach. How would you like to unwrap the gift of loss, where we can ensure that your people, purpose and profits thrive? Book your gift discovery session now at livelovebydesign.com.
Karen, thank you so much. That is an amazing offer for our viewers who may be going through a loss of someone or something significant in their lives. And talking with you would be an amazing thing for them to do.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's time to unwrap the gift so that they can design a life where they live and love. That's what it's all about. We're all here to thrive.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that myself. And I would like to thank all of you for watching us today and for being a part of our community. This series of conversations with women is inspired by my latest book, From Upside Down to Right Side Up, Turning Transition into Triumph. My books, the articles I write, and these conversations are intended to share stories from the heart and life strategies that will help others. I invite you to share them with the women in your life so none of us will ever again feel like we are alone. Many of us have gone through similar experiences, and we're here to support you. As Karen said, I believe it's our time to thrive. Will you join us on that ride? Till next time, I'm Maria Tomas Keegan.